What's going on, guys? This is an Illegal Defense, episode 14 of our NFL part. So, we're going to get straight into our games for our weekly recap. First game we got up is the 49ers versus the Dolphins. 49ers took care of business and won this game 33 to 7. Unfortunately,
17.
33 to 17, my apologies. But unfortunately, the 49ers had a huge loss with Jimmy G. He's obviously out for the season, so Brock Purdy had to come in, Mr. Irrelevant, and take care of business, but seems to get the job done enough. And yeah, the 49ers came out on top. What was your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, yeah, we were waiting to see this game. This was the game I was most excited for coming into this week. And man, the 49ers came out to play. They kind of clamped down on those Miami Dolphins players and wouldn't let Tua shred them like he's been shredding a lot of other teams all year. Held those receivers and pretty much in check without letting them go crazy. And yeah, like that defense is legit. They showed up. They proved they are one of the best teams in the NFC. And on as far as the Dolphins go, tough loss. They've already kind of been taking some losses when Tua was out, so it's kind of important for them to get the wins they can to kind of reestablish themselves. That being said, they still have a pretty good record, and the problem for them is they're just in a division that's stacked right
It's
now.
really tough.
But yeah, look, they just ran into a tough defense. We know in the NFL, every game is a tough game. This one against one of the better teams. I thought it was a measuring stick game to see how legit they are. And while I won't say now they're not a legit threat, I do think it kind of put the Dolphins back to earth a little bit. Uh, some people very excited for what they can do in terms of making a playoff run. I don't think that's gone out the window, but it does kind of, I guess, put some things into perspective in terms of, look, there's still a ways for them to go at least. Now, does that mean they can't start peaking later towards the playoffs? No, but we understand that that kind of has to happen because them as they are, they can't play a game like that and think they're going to go in a playoff run.
Yeah, you can't do that.
No matter how good that 49ers defense is. Not to mention the fact that they gave up 33 points to the 49ers, which, look, the 49ers, they have some weapons, but I don't think,
They're not one of the most like
yeah,
explosive
yeah, you shouldn't
defenses
be
or
letting them score
offenses.
33 points on you. If you're putting up, 40 something points and they're going to have tons of possessions, okay, fine. If it's not some type of a shootout like that, you really can't afford to give up that many points to this 49ers team. If they have 33 points, I don't know what team is beating them if they're able to put up that much because I don't think any team is really going to run up the score on them if they're able to put up 33 points. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But otherwise, like you said, tough loss in terms of quarterback play. Ironically, I think for that team, they will probably manage okay.
Yeah, I think so for
I
sure.
don't know. Did they say Jimmy G is definitely out for the year?
Yeah, so Jimmy G is out for the year. They're gonna stick with Brock Purdy. Obviously, I mean they have very little depth at the quarterback position. Obviously, with Trey Lance going down, now Jimmy G. Kyle Shanahan mentioned it, I think, in the post press conference. But I mean, I think if I'm Shanahan or if I'm like just a 49ers fan, I think Shanahan believes in Purdy like
I guess
pretty
he
much
does
because it's
because
like
they could have picked up Baker and they did.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's like you could pick up like Baker's not the greatest quarterback.
but at least he can start for you.
Yeah, and we've seen him start with a great defense and with a run game, which is identical to what they have at the 49ers. So,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how he plays. I think he did make a lot of good throws on Sunday. He did make a lot of good just decisions and he kind of had that grittiness to him. As far as the 49ers offense without Jimmy Garoppolo, I think they'll miss him on third down. That's one of the great things about Jimmy G. He has a great third down conversion as a quarterback. So yeah, again, it's a tough loss, but I think the 49ers will be able to keep afloat.
Man, on another note for the 49ers, how rough is that? You lose both your starting quarterback,
Yeah.
so to say, in the same year, out for the year. You got to roll with Brock Purdy. We'll see what Brock Purdy could do. I'm sure they're still going to be able to get some wins behind that strong defense and running game, and Kyle Shanahan's creativeness on the offensive side of the ball. But what a weird situation if Brock Purdy starts to thrive and then they have make a
Three
decision between three
quarterbacks.
of these quarterbacks. I don't know if it'll get that far. My guess is Brock Purdy will probably do enough to make himself some money
Yeah.
if he can keep this team afloat. But just an interesting situation where two quarterbacks go down that plenty of teams could use either of them, and now you got to go with the third guy, and
And the third guy doesn't look too bad either.
yeah, so far he doesn't.
So moving on, we're gonna get into the Chiefs and Bengals game. The Chiefs visited Cincinnati and they lost 24-27. The Bengals took care of business. Jamar Chase, his comeback game, and you know, there's something about Joe Burrow in big games where he just rises to the occasion because there's been a lot of games this year where I've watched the Bengals and Joe Burrow. He kind of looked a little flustered, didn't look like himself. But again, it's like, all right, how important is this game? But when I mean, he matches up phenomenal against Joe or against
The Chiefs.
the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes. Like, so it's kind of like Joe Burrow. I feel like he has the it factor. Two, he's very poised. He gets rid of the ball quickly, and he's a very like he just has like a very calmness to him. And
Mhm.
as if I'm an NFL franchise and I have a quarterback that's very like, oh, there's pressure coming. Oh my God, he's gonna, you know, he embodies what you would want out of your quarterback. But just in general with this game, I think it was a great performance by him. Great performance by the Bengals defense as well to only hold the Chiefs to 24 points. I mean, it's hard and it's hard to hold the Chiefs to 20 points or 24 or like 30 points, whatever the case is. But hats off to the Bengals. I mean, they took care of business and they did what they could do. So
Yeah, and like you said, Joe Burrow's a problem for the Chiefs. They just can't. Oh, I mean, they can't get past the Bengals in general for some reason.
yeah,
If you're the Chiefs and you're having this spectacular season, do all you can to avoid being on the Bengals side of the bracket in the playoffs and having to play those guys. Because that team could just stomp their dreams away. And it seems like Joe Burrow, like you said, seems to play good in big games. Against the Chiefs, it's always going to be a big game for them. And I mean, look, there's a reason why, Joe Burrow is considered one of these franchise guys. He's like you said, he's a calm guy, but he also has that dog in him, right? We see him, one, be able to make incredible plays, but also he gets fired up and he gets the guys behind him, and which is another important part of being the leader of the team, and it's something that he's been able to kind of slide right in. Right, there's never been any questions about his leadership skills or his ability to lead the franchise. And people forget Joe Burrow's still a pretty young guy.
Yeah.
And he's really taking control of that franchise. There's no chatter about any sort of getting rid of Joe Burrow. You're very happy to have a guy like Joe Burrow who is considered one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Bengals fans will probably tell you he's probably top 10 or so.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's around that range. It's very hard at this day and age with so many quarterbacks where you're going to place him, but he is for sure one of the more promising quarterbacks in the NFL. And at such a young age, so much more to play, so much more that he can accomplish. So yeah, definitely big win for the Bengals. Their problem will be winning some of these other games that aren't big games, right? That's where they seem to stumble a bit. So we'll see how that goes as they try to, make their own push for the playoffs.
right. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the playoff situation, especially with how the AFC North is panning out. So,
Mhm.
speaking of divisions, we have another division game with the Commanders versus the Giants, and this was a tie ball game.
Yeah, this
So,
game goes to overtime, ends in a tie. They were showing all these graphics all week about what it means for the winner of this game. If either one of them won this game, they had like an 80% chance to make the playoffs, and then of course they tie it.
Pretty
They
good chances.
they do play again in 2 weeks, week and a half, something like that. I think the Commanders go on by and then they play the Giants again. One of those weird type of schedule things because they didn't play them earlier in the season and they have to
Now
play
they
them
have to
twice.
play them. Yeah.
So there'll be another opportunity there for both of these teams. But yeah, look, to get a tie here, it's not the greatest, it's not the worst for both of these teams, knowing they have a second chance. If you're the Commanders, you probably feel better about this than the Giants, considering this was a home game for the Giants. And the Commanders really have been kind of peaking of late. You know, they've been able to kind of start racking up these wins after a not so great start. Taylor Heineke comes in and kind of showing that he should have
He
been the
deserves
guy
the
from
spot, yeah.
from the beginning. You know, why did they try to move on from me? Last year they should have kept me as a starter. Pretty much is what he's saying with his play. So look, good for Heineke. He's making money. He was a guy who nobody would have thought would be in this position. And yeah, look, they have weapons. Their passing game, they show up sometimes. This game was iffy. The Giants are just a tough team, man. They play teams close, just being gritty, just finding a way to make some timely plays, finding a way to stay in the game, finding a way to get some stops here and there. They're not really spectacular on either side of the ball, so it's kind of weird to watch them all the time and think if they're going to win or
Show
not.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they've been close most of these games. I mean, the Seahawks game got Seahawks pulled away a little later in that matchup, and the score didn't reflect how close it was. But for the most part this year, the Giants play every game close. They've won more games that they lost. They're in a tough division in this NFC East where all those teams are fighting for the playoffs. So we'll see how this goes between these two teams, and we'll talk about the next matchup soon when they play again.
Yeah. So, with that being said, we're actually going to get into the next topics with the NFC East. I mean, obviously we just talked about them, and the AFC East, and how is it possible that they could have maybe three teams in the playoffs for each division?
Yeah. I would say I would lean towards yes for both of these divisions. I think at this point it's very likely that both the NFC East and AFC East have three teams in the playoffs. There is an oddball chance that especially NFC East, I mean, you might be in a situation where you find four teams in the playoffs with
Yeah.
the three wild card spots now, which would be insane.
Yeah, that'll be probably the first time. I mean, that would be the
Yeah,
first time. in
clearly it
history.
would be the
Right,
first time
right.
ever that happened. This is the first time that they even have three wild card spots. But yeah, and that just speaks to the quality of football in these divisions, right? Both of these divisions were, not very good. Obviously the Patriots are in the AFC East and they're kind of carrying it, and we know the Bills have been a ascending team over the last few years. So it's not like they were at the bottom of the barrel or anything, but they weren't thought of as a complete division,
Team,
right?
yeah.
We the Dolphins always up and down, and the Jets have just been terrible for so long. Now with those two teams stepping up, being able to get some wins, challenging those top teams like the Patriots and the Bills, it's made it a lot more interesting, and taking that best division out of the AFC West and brought it to the East,
Yeah.
which is something that nobody thought would happen. And then with the NFC East, I mean, they were kind of all bad to average teams over the last few years, and
It's always up in the air with who's gonna even win that division,
Yeah.
let alone have three playoff teams in the actual.
right. And now all four of them have been playing pretty well, and it's crazy to watch how all these teams end up in the same division, all starting to kind of get things under control. And obviously with the Eagles leading that division right now, after their offseason moves and that huge acquisition in AJ Brown, it's proving to be huge for them. Jalen Hurts really stepping up his play. The Cowboys staying afloat with Cooper Rush. Now they have Dak back, and the defense is rolling right now.
Yeah.
And then we just talked about the Giants and the Redskins, and their
How they've been
abilities.
able to improve in
Right.
such a great manner. So I mean, what's interesting with the NFC East. So the AFC East, we've seen like the Dolphins are always somewhat in the playoff hunt every year, which is kind of like it's always weird. Like they're just in the playoff hunt. The Bills and the Patriots have been head and head really, and the Jets have been obviously the garbage team in the division, but the Jets have been able to turn things around. Um, Obviously they've had a lot of losses with Mekhi Becton. They've had a lot of losses with even Hall, and it's tough. But they're able to still compete. They're able to still put out a good product of football. With the NFC East, it's interesting because as far as I mean, obviously the record tells us that the Eagles are going to win this division most likely. But again, a lot of football to be played. Eagles could slow down. What the Eagles kind of remind me of this year, and granted, like they obviously their record it speaks for itself, but they kind of remind me of that 11-0 Steelers team a few years ago, where it's like we kind of knew what the Steelers were, and they weren't really up to like they weren't an 11-0 respectable team where it's like the Chiefs can be like maybe let's say 9-2 or whatever, and we know like they're dominating these those 9 wins are dominant wins, whereas like the Eagles, I mean, they've had dominant wins, but it's also like they just seem like they're beatable. Like kind of like how we talked about with the TCU thing where it's like at what point are they gonna run out of luck? So I don't know. It's just weird. But the Cowboys, they've always Cowboys always played great football. They just seem to not be able to get it done in the playoffs. The Giants, Dable's been able to do a great job there in turning around that culture and finding wins, finding ways to win. And the Commanders obviously they it was weird because in the beginning of the season we're like, oh, it looks like they're gonna be the bottom of the barrel and whatever. Like, but they turned it around and now they're competing just as much as the Giants are. So it's just crazy to see. But again, I do think it's possible as well. I think we could see all. I think it's very likely we see all three of these teams in both divisions make a playoff push. So with that being said, we could get into the most complete team. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
who do you see as the
I
most
mean,
complete team?
look, it's funny how you were talking about the Eagles and how they seem just kind of beatable despite their record. Um, I'd agree 1,000% with that. But when you look at the most complete team, I had to take the Eagles here.
Mm,
And the reason why I had to take the Eagles is because um, if we're looking at the most complete team, not the best team, I think the Eagles is the clear answer. Because they can pose problems in just about every situation. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. They can play defense. They are solid on special teams. Do you need them to make a play in the secondary? They can do that. Do they need to sack the quarterback? They can do that. Do you need the running backs to run for 100 yards? They can do that.
yeah,
The quarterback can run on you. They can air it out to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and et cetera, et cetera. Goddard is a weapon from the tight end position. They kind of have almost all their bases covered. So I wanted to. If I felt like before I thought about this, I probably would have said the Bills.
mm,
Because they shown the ability to be a dominant team on offense and on defense. But I think their running game leaves a lot to be desired,
yeah, for
and
sure.
they don't necessarily need it to win games. But you know, it still is a factor when factoring in a complete team. You could say a similar thing with the Chiefs, which I don't think the Chiefs are as dominant or have the highest ceiling in terms of defense like the Bills do. Right? I think the Bills defense could kind of take their team to another level, but they lack the running game as well, and it doesn't mean they're a bad team because they're able to do things. We see the shovel passes and the screens and all these kind of weird tosses that Mahomes will do. That inside pass to Kelsey
Yeah,
in the goal line they love so much. They're very creative in how
very
they
like gimmicky as
yeah
well.
and how they
Right.
do things. But yeah, to me, the Eagles are the complete team. Although I wouldn't have them as my personal best
Best
team
team.
in the NFL. I'd probably pick a small amount of teams that I'd probably favor over them when it comes to the postseason and getting some big wins later on.
Yeah, so I think I mean that's 100% respectable being that they are such a well-rounded team. I mean, we've watched them and I mean, even their lines, both ends of the lines.
Right.
I've seen Jalen Hurts have literally probably the size of this table, amount of space, relax in the pocket, make a decision, and then if there's nothing there, go, which is crazy. But um, as far as most complete team, it was kind of hard for me to kind of come up with one because I think there's two teams that come to mind, and I think prior to Jimmy G getting injured, I was gonna go with the 49ers because I think um, Jimmy G is not gonna he's not gonna be a Josh Allen and throw you lights out 300 yards, four touchdowns, no interceptions kind of game. But he knows how to manage games. He'll convert on third down. He'll be able to make the right decisions and right reads. Then on top of that, they have a great run defense. I mean, they have a great run offense. I mean, their run defense is great, and their pass defense is great.
Spectacular.
So it's just like the defense that the 49ers have right now is stellar, and it's super unfortunate that Jimmy G gets injured because I think first off, I think any team doesn't want to go and verse the 49ers. We just seen what they did to the Dolphins. If I'm any team in the NFC, I personally don't see any other team competing with them. I mean, you could say the Eagles, but playoff football is a completely different animal. It's a completely different animal, and we've seen what happened to one seeds. I mean, we've seen what happened with the Titans last year. They just got mowed by the Bengals. Um, and I mean, nobody anticipated that, and they just took away from the season that the Titans had. And then on top of that, it's like with the loss of that, it kind of made me have to come back down to earth. But as much as I hate to say it, I'm gonna have to go with the Cowboys. Um, Dak is playing great right now. I think I'm not a huge fan of Dak, but I think their offense is clicking. They just put up 50 points on the Colts. I mean, it's the Colts, granted, but they're still like the Colts are still a decent team. And their defense is great. Michael Parsons is a great pass rusher. He can influence the game in so many ways that a lot of defensive players can't in the NFL. And they're just I don't know. It just seems like they have a lot of continuity on the defense. The offense was there's a lot of questions that they've had throughout the season, with CD and the drops and what the status is with Zeke and Tony Pollard, who they're gonna really go towards. But I think they've found that balance because they finally found out that Tony Pollard is actually a good weapon to use and to utilize. I mean, he's not a touchdown machine, but the guy gets the job done. But yeah, I think I'm gonna roll with the Cowboys, and although I think they're probably gonna be a wild card team unless they go and they beat the Eagles. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna go with the Cowboys for the most complete team. So with that being said, we're gonna get into some of our weekly previews. We obviously go over the what was it? The Jets versus the Bills. So the Bills are the -9 favorite. Obviously, I think it's because they're at home. So what are your thoughts with this game? How do you see this really playing out?
Yeah. The Jets actually beat the Bills earlier this year on a Josh Allen fumble, I believe, that
Yeah.
they sack fumbled them on the what would have been a potential game winning drive for the Bills late in the game. I think the Bills are going to handle business this time. They get the Jets at home. The Jets are going through this weird quarterback transition where they don't want to start Zach Wilson, so they want to go with Mike White. Mike White has one good game. he's the savior. All of a sudden, he comes back to Earth. Now, what are they gonna do? I told you immediately after they mentioned they were gonna start Mike White. I didn't understand that
Yeah.
because Zach Wilson is the potential franchise quarterback, and they've been winning games. I mean, look at their record; they've been winning with Zach Wilson. So I don't understand the change. I feel like in that situation, the Jets would have been better off sticking with Zach Wilson and trying to work through the issues, right?
Hmm.
Because instead you change to quarterback, and on one hand, it might help because it makes Zach Wilson maybe more focused and dial in and say, "Oh, I really have to be on top of my game, or these guys are going to bench me." But on the other hand, you kind of bail him out from figuring out the issues that were happening with the offense. So now when Zach Wilson comes back, yeah, they probably told him, "Oh, look, you got to do this better, you got to do that better." But he hasn't really worked it out. He hasn't had a chance to figure it out. And as a young quarterback, you
You
don't
have
get
to
a
be able to
chance to
grow
learn
through
that
that.
way. It's almost like if you look at basketball, some coaches they won't call the timeout when things go bad because they want you to work through it. They don't want to bail you out by calling the timeout,
Right.
right? And so this was like that type of situation to me, and I feel like they might have made the wrong decision. I don't think destroys anything with the Jets or anything like that
No.
long term, but I think it would have been better. They would have been better off to keep him. Um, I haven't heard anything. I haven't paid attention much to what's been said about the quarterback status of the Jets. I think Mike White is still the presumed starter at this point. I'll be interested to see how this turns out after this game because we know how good the Bills are. They're gonna put up points, and they also have a pretty solid defense.
Yeah.
So, the Bills might torpedo Mike White in this game, and they have to trot out Zach Wilson. But yeah, look, 9 point spread. When you look at the record, that seems a bit funny. But like we said, with these quarterback issues and the
You
Jets
never know
just
what's gonna
and the
really
Jets
happen.
just ability to fail somehow, no matter how good they're doing. This year they're having a good year. They could just completely implode right now and miss the playoffs for all we know.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I do think they're gonna lose this game. I think it's a lot to be going through the struggles they're going through right now, with the quarterback issues, and then play a solid team like the Bills in their house. Especially when
It's
you know
December too, so
it's December. It's cold, which both teams play in the cold, right? They play in the Northeast with no dome, um, out in the elements. But you know, the Bills have dropped some games that they should have won. They need to win these games. And they have a higher ceiling and a higher gear that they could go to that the Jets just can't.
they don't have that at all.
And yeah, so I see the Bills winning this game. 9 points is a lot. I'd probably say it's probably 60-40 the Bills cover. More likely that they cover than not. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close game either because the Jets defense does show up and tend to find a way to make some stops. But yeah, certainly a fun game. And I also don't think the weather is going to be too bad this weekend. So won't be any like crazy snow games or something like that, which would
Yeah.
be fun to see, but would probably hurt the Bills' chances a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean I'm right with you. I don't think the Jets are gonna be able to sustain the Bills. And then on top of that, the Bills want revenge for losing. So that plays into a lot of things. So the next game that we're gonna get into is the Eagles versus the Eagles versus the Giants. They're visiting MetLife, and they're the -7 favorite, which is interesting. I would think that the spread would be a little bit more, considering that the Giants just tied with the Commanders, and I believe the Eagles are a much better team than the Commanders, although they lost to them. Um, but I the way I see this really playing out is kind of being like one of those run heavy kind of games. I don't know, maybe Jalen Hurts is gonna be able to get it going passing, but I think this may be a close one. And I think maybe the Giants give the Eagles a loss. It would be nice to see Daniel Jones kind of have a pretty good game. And the Eagles, they've again, they're just a team that I don't believe in too much. So I think they're due for a loss, and then on top of that, it's like just being an underdog at home. We seen how this played out throughout the season with a lot of team. I mean, even with the Giants. The Giants have been underdogs in most of their games, and they've been able to come out with wins. So
Yeah, yeah. Look, -7 spread in a tough divisional game with this NFC East. It's literally anybody's ball game anytime any of these four teams play each other. Um, yeah, I mean, like you said, probably be a close game knowing how things go. The problem with the Eagles, or the problem that the Eagles pose for the Giants, is that the Eagles have an ability to really pull away and put the game out of reach, where the Giants don't have that card. So that's the one thing that can kind of you know, completely change the game. Jalen Hurts could just start airing it out to AJ Brown and go up 3 touchdowns, and it's kind of game over.
out of reach. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Eagles do have that variable to their team, but otherwise, I would expect this to be a pretty close game, and like you said, one that the Giants can win. You know, Daniel Jones and his ability to run the football paired with Saquon is a lot to handle. That being said, the Eagles defense is pretty solid. But look, we've seen in other football games, it's only a few plays. They could break off a few long runs, and that could be the difference right there. So 7 point spread. That's probably about right in terms of where Vegas would place this spread. Although I could easily see it being a -9 spread. I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas placed it that way either. But yeah, -7 seems about right. I'd say I'd lean towards the Giants covering it, but I wouldn't put money or put a large amount of money on this. If you want to sprinkle a little bit on it, fine. But yeah, covering that 7 point spread when the Eagles could just come out and air it out against the Giants, put it out of reach is a bit tough.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that game, and we'll be on the lookout for that next week. So the next game we're gonna get into is the Dolphins versus the Chargers. The Dolphins are the -3 favorite, and they're visiting the Chargers, which is interesting. We've seen the Dolphins. They just dropped one against the 49ers. Obviously, that was a tough game and kind of like a testing game, but it was nice to see what how they measured up against a playoff like team. The Chargers, they're also a great team. We've seen them struggle also as well. I think this is kind of an even matchup. This is very similar teams in kind of like how they're able to win games and how they've lost games. So I mean, I think overall, I'm gonna go with the Chargers. They're the underdog, but I think Justin Herbert take care of business, and I think the Dolphins drop two in a row.
Yeah, this game is weird one to judge. I mean, I don't. I would agree that the Dolphins are probably shown to be the better team. Um, but potential wise, I think the Chargers can do and be right there with the Dolphins any game. Um, the Dolphins have proven it a bit more this year, but yeah, it's hard to kind of discount the Chargers' ability to make plays with a healthy Keenan Allen back and being at home. I would have thought this would have been maybe a pick 'em.
Yeah.
Because that maybe if the Dolphins were favored, it would have been maybe by 3 points, but then it's the Chargers at home. But it seems like Vegas really likes the Dolphins in this game. Um, and yeah, I probably would roll with the Dolphins just because it's funny. Both teams kind of really need this game. This is an important game for both of these teams' season. In terms of the Dolphins suffering that setback loss to the Niners, really needing to get back on track and pile up these wins in a division where everyone else is piling up wins. The Chargers, they're trying to still climb their way into the playoffs. And they're a solid team that hasn't really lived up to expectations, but they could easily be one of the teams to make the playoffs and pose a huge threat to just about anybody they face.
Yeah.
So it's desperation time, right? It's December. We're getting towards the end of the year. We're trying to figure out the playoff picture. Both these teams, I would assume, would be desperate. I would probably roll with the Dolphins just because they seem to be more consistent, and I don't know what I'm going to get from the Chargers. If it wasn't for that, I probably would roll with the Chargers at home. But yeah, it just seems
you never know what you're gonna get with
it
them.
just seems like you don't know what you're gonna get. I think smart money goes to the Dolphins, but that being said, in reality, it's this seems like anybody's game to me.
Yeah. So the next game that or actually not the next game, but the next segment that we're gonna get into is our best bets. The first game for our best bets, we have the Bucks versus the 49ers. 49ers to the -3.5 favorite. So that's interesting. I would go with the 49ers with this bet. I mean, I think they play well one at home. Obviously, yes, there is Brock Purdy and he's the starting quarterback, but again, when you have a defense that they have and you have a run game to lean on, it puts a lot less pressure on the quarterback. And we've seen the Bucks struggling offensively, which a struggling offense against a stellar defense is a recipe for a disaster. So
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think the 49ers are the play to make here. That defense is super solid. We saw the Bucks against the Saints last week. They're able to kind of stay on top of that division where none of them could find wins. I think the 49ers are going to be able to keep the Bucks in check and really shut down that pass games in terms of scoring points. I think they'll probably still be able to throw it around and get some yards, but I think they'll be able to limit the points and have more of a bend but not break type of defense. And I look, the Bucks actually have a pretty decent run defense, but I think with the amount of weapons the 49ers have, the ability to hit some short passes, some screens, they'll pose some problems for the Bucks. And I look to be a very low scoring game though. I'd probably see this as one of those like 17-13 type of games or something like that. But I think that the 49ers will continue winning here, even with their backup quarterback, and leave the Bucks in a position where they're gonna really have to fight it out till the end to see who could win that division of theirs.
yeah. So the next game we have is the Vikings. They're the +1 underdog versus the Lions, right?
Yes,
Which is actually kind of crazy.
And I saw it at +2 at a certain point. I don't remember when I looked at the lines in preparation for this, but yeah, it's very odd that the Lions are favored here. A lot of people have been talking about that. I'm taking
it.
I'm taking the Vikings. I'm taking the Vikings with the points. It's a tricky thing for Vegas to do this. It's almost like, are you trying to trick us, or is this how you really feel? So whatever, I'll blindly take the Vikings here and think that they're going to win this game, and I'll let them prove me wrong. But I don't see any reason why the Vikings wouldn't win this game. We saw the Lions blow out the Jaguars last week. But that doesn't.
But again,
that doesn't change for me how I feel about the Vikings. Look, and the Lions are a solid team. Can they win this game? I think they could very well win this game.
I think that's the thing with the Lions. They have that puncher's chance. Like
they
with
could
a lot of teams.
They have a very their offense has been rolling. They've been playing pretty well as of late. But look, against a Vikings team that's been solid all year. This isn't a primetime game, so no worries about Kirk Cousins, disappearing. Justin Jefferson has been on fire. Defense solid.
Dalvin Cook's on money.
I mean, look, Dalvin Cook has been great. This is a divisional game, right? So it's tricky in that sense, but I'll roll with the Vikings here, and make them prove me wrong.
Yeah, and then the next game you got is the Texans versus the Cowboys. Texans are the plus 17 underdog, which is interesting because I mean they played pretty well against the Browns. I mean it was Deshaun Watson's first game, but granted, I mean the Browns are a pretty solid team, so
Yeah. Yeah, and look, there's a and we talked about this another time about how once it's over plus 9.5, how much it shifts for the underdog to cover. Plus 17, that's a big spread to cover. You
yeah, that's
rarely
huge.
see these type of spreads for NFL games. The Cowboys though have absolutely throttled some of their recent opponents, and I think that's playing a factor here with how good their defense has been playing,
No.
plus their offense's ability to put up some points. That being said, the Texans, oddly enough, have hung around in most of their games this year.
Yeah.
Right? You talked about the Browns; they were hanging around in that game. The Eagles, who best record in the league, they played a very close game with them. Um, I don't see why it would be so different for the Cowboys. That being said, I can see this being a 42-7 type of game for the Cowboys as well.
Yeah.
But and that would probably mean that the Cowboys are scoring on defense, like pick sixes,
Yeah,
scooping scores, that
yeah.
type of thing. That they have that type of ability on defense to really score from the defensive side of the ball. So yeah, if they could, two defensive scores, I mean, you could really blow this game wide open
Yeah.
and kind of suck all the hope and willingness to really put it out there for the Texans and kind of just leave that team deflated and jump on them early, put your neck on their throat and just really take them out of the game. So, but yeah, otherwise, I'm pretty certain the Texans will cover this spread, super huge spread. Texans have shown the ability to get some stops on the defensive side of the ball. Their offense is not great, but they've been able to do enough to keep them in games. And when the games aren't high scoring games, they're able to
They're
stay in it.
winnable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So especially 17-point spread. So I mean that's a lot of points. But
Right.
with that being said, we're gonna wrap this up for our NFL segment, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe.